months of campaigning across the state.
It comes down to this, Georgia. Everyone's counting on us.
Countless promises by influential supporters.
Kelly fights for me, David fights for me.
One state can chart the course, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next generation.
And hundreds of millions of dollars spent, all for your vote.
Tonight, the direction of the U.S. Senate unfolds live right here on Fox 54.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our coverage of the Georgia runoff elections. I'm Mark Blaine.
And I am Courtney Hicks. All eyes on Georgia tonight for the Senate runoff races that will decide control of the U.S. Senate. Democratic candidate Jon Ossoff is looking to unseat Republican Senator David Perdue.
The other race is a special election runoff between incumbent Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. Let's take a look at the current numbers involving this race. Right now, Kelly Loeffler holding a slim lead, 51% to Raphael Warnock's 49%. This is with 63% of the precincts reporting. Let's now turn things over to Jacob Pecklow for a breakdown of the returns for the Loeffler-Warnock race. Jacob.
Well, Mark and Courtney, so this has been our race that's been going back and forth all night, kind of like what we expected would be the case with Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. You can see right now 44,000 votes separate these. So I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can take a look at it for yourself. You can see 1.75 versus 1.71 for Raphael Warnock. So you can see the race is mostly filled out. Lots of red still across the board. Savannah is still gone blue, and the bigger parts of the state, the big cities, have gone blue, and the rest of the state, an abundance of red. So it's kind of what we expected would be the case. Still very little separation between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler, guys.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Our team coverage continues as we now want to check in with Danielle Ledbetter and political analyst Dr. Gregory Murray for a breakdown of this specific race. Good evening to you both.
Good evening, Courtney. So we have these two Senate runoff races. This is very unique, very unprecedented. Can you talk a little bit more about what led to these unique circumstances?
Well, it's a great story. We basically got to the November election and none of the candidates reached the 50% threshold that you need in Georgia to avoid a runoff. So we ended up in a runoff here. The dynamics are pretty interesting. In the Perdue-Ossoff race, there was a Republican that skimmed off, or a Libertarian who had run previously as a Republican who skimmed off some votes. And on the other side, in Loeffler-Ossoff and Warnock, excuse me, they had 20 candidates, so it's not shocking that they ended up with less than 50% of the vote.
And then specifically with this Loeffler-Warnock race, it's very, very close. How do you see this continuing to shape up as we go through the night?
Well, I think it's going to continue to be very, very close. The polling going into it was showing it was very close. They spent extraordinary amounts of money on both sides, probably as much as they could possibly spend. So it's a pure voter turnout process right now, and the party that turns out the most votes is the one that's going to prevail, most likely.
Awesome. Well, we'll continue to have Dr. Murray here with his insight and perspective, but for now, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, thank you so much, Danielle and Dr. Greg. We appreciate that. There is a lot weighing on the turnout of this runoff, as so many here in Georgia and really across the country are anxiously awaiting the results. Our Maya Payton is live in Columbia County at one of the polling locations. She has the latest for us tonight. Good evening, Maya.
Yes, I'm here in Columbia County at their warehouse as they continue to count votes. I'm here with the director, Nancy Gay, and she's going to tell us, people are at home anxiously waiting. They want to know what's going on. Tell us about the process right now.
Okay, so for right now, we're actually have all the voting precincts from Election Day that have turned in their election results. We're fixing to upload the early voting and absentee information. Outside of that, we did start the day with some glitches, for the lack of a better term. We had probably about 15 to 17 precincts that opened up beautifully, like they should, like they did in the last elections. The other remaining precincts did have issues with it's a little security key, and something with the programming did not go right, so they were unable to open the tabulators, and same with the poll worker to open the BMDs. Once we figured out what the issue was, we got a plan in place. The deputies that were at every precinct came out to Appling, got new cards, got new keys, and then everything was up and running like flawlessly at 10 o'clock. Those precincts did use emergency ballots, which is the backup plan that the state has in place, and that worked well as well. For those people that cast a vote on the emergency ballot, they were also tallied at the precinct on today by the poll managers with poll watchers watching.
And just speaking of that, what about those at home who may be a little concerned about the security of their vote?
We have every step in place that is required by law in order to maintain the security of the vote. It is challenging when you're faced with situations like today that we've never been in before. So were there mistakes made? I'm sure there were. Can we do better? Absolutely. But everything is fine.
Now, this is a tough question to answer, but as people are sitting at home, I'm sure they're just wondering, when is this going to be over with? How far along are you guys with counting? And
yeah, we're still waiting on the early voting and absentee. After that, we should have everything uploaded tonight, and then anything that is military or UOCAVA that's postmarked by today, and any provisionals we have until Friday to count and accept, and then we'll be able to hopefully certify and move forward.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nancy. Of course, I'll keep you guys updated here in Columbia County. I'm Maya Payton, Fox 54.
All right, thank you so much, Maya. All right, that was a look at Columbia County. Now let's move on over to Richmond County, where our Mary Klingler has been at the Richmond County Tabulation Center on Lumpkin Road, where those votes in that particular county are being voted. And she joins us with the latest. Hey, Mary.
Hey, Courtney, that's right. It's been a busy night over here in Richmond County when it comes to counting these ballots, making sure that your ballot counts. Right now, we are pretty much winding down at this time, just waiting on a few of those mail-in votes to come in and get that final number in. We probably won't see that tonight, but right now, 53% voter turnout. That's expected to get up to about 55% in the end, but we've got 64 fully reported precincts with about 4 partially reported, so that's pretty much what we're waiting for at this time. 70% for Raphael Warnock and 70% about the same with John Ossoff in the lead, so it looks like the Democrats are taking the lead for Richmond County. Reporting live in Augusta, I'm Mary Klingler, Fox 54 News Now.
Mary, thanks so much for that. Let's now take a look at the latest numbers from the Perdue-Ossoff Senate race. Right now, the incumbent David Perdue leading the way with 51% of the vote to John Ossoff's 49% of the vote. This is with 71% of precincts reporting. Perdue holding 1,846,771 votes at this point. Let's now check back in with Jacob Pecklow for a breakdown of those numbers on the Perdue-Ossoff race.
Well, Mark, this is the biggest separation we've seen so far tonight. And we checked in with Mary and we checked in with Maya, and we saw how the two very different tales for these counties. Richmond County has almost all of theirs done. Columbia County, not so much. If we go and we map and we break this down county by county, you can see 4% of the precincts have reported so far. So far, David Perdue has a big advantage in what has been cast, about 3-1 over John Ossoff. But the thing that is so interesting about this is you got to remember, these were the 3 critical counties in the district attorney's race with Natalie Payne, where it was Burke County and Columbia and Richmond County ultimately sent the most votes over the top, which allowed Natalie Payne to be voted out. Jared Williams is now coming in. Similar pattern emerging tonight. Maybe a lot of those votes coming from Columbia County will be able to sway and increase David Perdue's lead. We knew that of these 2 candidates, these 2 races that we're talking about tonight, David Perdue might have had a slightly bit more security in his numbers versus Kelly Loeffler. So it's going to be it's going to stay tight all throughout the night, but finally this is the first time we've actually seen 51-48 in over an hour. It was staying in that 50-50 range for a very long time, and now we're starting to see a little bit of that jockeying, but David Perdue starting to open things up just a little bit. Maybe if it was a football game, they're starting to run the ball and chew up some clock.
Good analogy. Thank you so much, Jacob. Now for some more perspective on the Perdue-Ossoff race, let's go to Fox 54's Daniel Ledbetter, who's with political analyst Dr. Greg Murray. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening. So we're talking about this Perdue-Ossoff race now. It's very, very close. Now, back in November, it was close as well, and it was a shock to some that we even got a runoff out of this race here. So can you talk to us a little bit more about why it's even so close in the first place?
Yeah, you're right. People were surprised about the November election and it being so close, and actually Biden pulling off the state. I think what happened was this race is really about President Trump. President Trump mobilized a lot of people and energized a lot of people, particularly Democrats. And the Democratic Party and Democratic operatives made special efforts to go out and get new voters registered and to energize and mobilize Democratic voters, which was probably not too hard because they were pretty enthusiastic about voting anyhow. And I think that's one of the primary reasons, if not the main reason, that Democratic turnout has been pretty healthy and at surprising levels.
And then we talked earlier about the money. Can you talk about how much money has been spent on these campaigns and how that's impacting what we're seeing tonight?
Yeah, there's been a ton of money spent. There's been almost $500 million spent. If you combine that with the general election, there's been over 800 million or about 800 million spent. There are incredible amounts of money. The thing about it is, although the Republicans have outspent the Democrats, there's almost more money than people know what to do with. They're spending money in just about any way that they can find to spend it. So it's not really an issue of money determining what happens. There's plenty of money to go around by both sides.
Got it. Well, we're going to continue to talk about this for the remainder of the night, but for now, back to you guys.
Danielle and Dr. Murray, we thank you for that. Our Sydney Moore is following Democratic challenger Jon Ossoff's campaign. He's trying to unseat Republican Senator David Perdue. She joins us now live from the News Center. Good evening, Sydney.
Good evening, Mark. Well, of course, I spoke with Ossoff earlier today, and then he was encouraging voters to get out and vote, of course, when they still had time. Now, just yesterday, he and Democrat candidate Reverend Raphael Warnock was in the Garden City encouraging people to vote. And, you know, Ossoff said that there was a great turnout of young voters, and he says it's great that they are really taking it all in and being a part of this election process. Now, he also said that he spoke with Augusta Mayor Hardy Davis about Augusta's infrastructure and working to help, you know, with the economic crisis due to the pandemic. Now, of course, you know, all eyes will continue to be on Georgia as we continue to wait anxiously for the results of the Georgia Senate runoff election. In the News Center, Sydney Moore, Fox 54 News Now.
All right, thank you so much for that, Sydney. All right, Mark, it's time to switch gears, at least it's for a moment, as First Alert meteorologist, Chief Meteorologist Jay Jeffries will have the latest forecast for the week coming up.
And after Jay checks in, we'll continue our coverage of the U.S. Senate runoff election. Stay with us. We're back following the break. Welcome back. As you know, a major election is taking place here in Georgia tonight. The state's 2 Senate seats up for grabs with the balance of power in the U.S. Senate at stake. After weeks of campaign events and endless commercials, voters have weighed in, and no doubt President-elect Joe Biden and President Trump are both hoping their endorsements will play a big factor in the results. Fox News correspondent Lauren Blanchard joins us now live from Washington. Good evening, Laura.
Good evening, Mark. Well, it's now about 2.5 hours since the last polls closed there in Georgia. All that's left is to count the millions of ballots and then determine which party will control the Senate. A historic runoff election is coming to an end in Georgia. Both Republicans David Perdue and Senator Kelly Loeffler are seeking re-election, and they have branded themselves as a firewall to the upcoming Biden administration's policies.
What's at stake here is we want to hold the line against this radical socialist agenda.
Their challengers, Democrats Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, have said they would support President-elect Biden's domestic agenda.
They need someone in Washington, D.C. who understands that health care is a human right. We need somebody in Washington, D.C. who know that workers are the ones who make America great.
For weeks, state officials in Georgia have come under attack from President Trump and his allies over how they handled the November election. Those results took more than a week. Georgia's Secretary of State is confident about how everything is being handled this time around. The Peach State recently passed a rule that allows officials to begin processing mail-in ballots before Election Day, which will help speed up the count Tuesday night.
You want to make sure that everyone has confidence. There's been so many dispersions and false ruminations and disinformation that's been going on that it's really hurt voter confidence in this election.
Told this would be a tight race there in Georgia, and that is proving to be true tonight. The race is still too close to call, and because of this, election officials there in Georgia say they are going to be paying close attention to military and overseas ballots. Those ballots have until Friday to make it in to be received in order to be counted. Mark?
All right. Thank you, Lauren. I'll take it from here. We appreciate that. Coming up, we'll have the latest on the race for Public Service Commission District 4. We don't want to forget about that race. It's very important as well. We'll be right back. Stay close. And welcome back in. Fox 54 is also keeping an eye on the Public Service Commission District 4 election. Democratic candidate Daniel Blackman is looking to unseat Republican incumbent, Lauren McDonald Jr., who's held that seat since 1998. Taking a look at these current results, we have here the incumbent, Mr. McDonald, with 52% of the vote, and he has just under 2 million votes counted. And then over on the other side, we have the challenger Blackman with about 48% of the vote and just over 1.7 million. So still at this hour, a pretty close race for those very interested as well here in our area, Mark.
Yeah, not a bad horse race. Ahead in our next half hour, our coverage of the Senate runoff elections continues. We'll hear from political analyst Greg Murray. We'll get his take on how the races are shaking out tonight.
Stay with us. We will be right back.